Tonight on CBC Vancouver News.
We have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries.
Markets rebound after the U.S. president backs down on reciprocal tariffs he slapped on dozens of countries, with one big exception. What does it all mean for Canada? Plus,
I think it's kind of weird that they bring students from a country to a different country.
BC's biggest school district hits the brakes on field trips to the U.S. amid heightened security concerns at the border.
Maybe having a visa issue or concern raised.
And to join or not to join? A citizens' assembly recommends BC's capital and a larger nearby city become one, and voters will likely get a say.
This is CBC Vancouver News.
Hello, I'm Dan Burritt. Thanks for joining us. There was a sigh of relief for many people around the world as Donald Trump backed down from the reciprocal tariffs he slapped on numerous countries for now. But not China. The U.S. president is increasing levies on Chinese imports even further. The CBC's Chris Reyes has our top story.
In a single social media post, President Donald Trump made a sudden midday reversal of his historic tariff policy, announcing that he's raising tariffs on China to 125% effective immediately and pausing reciprocal tariffs for 90 days on more than 75 countries that have agreed to negotiate. Speaking at an event, President Trump insisted his strategy for getting better trade deals for the U.S. is working.
We have a tremendous amount of spirit from other countries, including China. China wants to make a deal. They just don't know how quite to go about it. You know, it's one of those things they don't know how quite. They're proud people. And President Xi's a proud man. I know him very well, and they don't know quite how to go about it, but they'll figure it out. They're in the process of figuring it out, but they want to make a deal. And we have many other countries, as you know, many more than 75. And they all want to come, and they want to come here, or they'll go to Commerce, or they'll go to Treasury.
China and the U.S. have been in a tit-for-tat escalation on tariffs since President Trump first announced a tariff hike of 34% on Chinese imports last week. In a statement, the Chinese Foreign Ministry said the U.S. escalation of tariffs on China is a mistake on top of a mistake, which seriously infringes on China's legitimate rights and interests and seriously undermines the rules-based multilateral trading system. As of Wednesday morning, China had raised tariffs on American goods to 84%.
You might even say that he goaded China into a bad position. They responded. They have shown themselves to the world to be the bad actors. And we are willing to cooperate with our allies and with our trading partners who did not retaliate. It wasn't a hard message. Don't retaliate.
Secretary Bessent said negotiations are already underway with a number of trading partners, including South Korea, Japan, and Vietnam. He also said that each deal will be negotiated separately by the president. Chris Reyes, CBC News, New York.
BC's largest school district has hit pause on any more public school field trips to the U.S. That move by Surrey comes amid mounting security concerns at the U.S.-Canada border. Our John Hernandez spoke with students and immigration experts who backed the move.
From field trips to sports tournaments, the Surrey School District takes kids on about 24 trips to the U.S. each year. But it could be a while before these buses make the drive south.
We just felt at this point in time that we really should be looking at pausing some of these field trips.
The district says it's reviewing scheduled trips to the U.S. and won't be planning any more for the foreseeable future. The freeze comes amid a travel advisory warning Canadians of increased scrutiny when entering the U.S.
The last thing we want to do is have a student or a staff member put into a very, very difficult situation. At a border, maybe having a visa issue or concern raised.
This is taking away from the children. It's taking away from experiences. But what's happening throughout the world and what the administration in the U.S. is doing is unpredictable.
This Surrey immigration consultant says it's the right move. She says many families in the community may not have Canadian citizenship and could feel uncomfortable sending kids to the U.S. amid international tensions.
So what parent is okay to send their child knowing that we may have these concerns or these difficulties might be faced by them?
The District Parent Advisory Council says it also backs the decision. And while trips to the States might not come around too often for your average student, several teens at Surrey's largest secondary school, Sullivan Heights, are also in solidarity.
We don't need to go there. Like, we can get education from both countries or one country. It really doesn't matter.
I think it's kind of weird that they bring students from a country to a different country. I mean, personally, keeping it local would be the best option.
The Vancouver School Board, the second largest district in the province, says U.S. trips are still allowed, but will continue to monitor the changing political climate. John Hernandez, CBC News, Surrey.
A veteran Vancouver police officer accused of sexual harassment by several female officers and students has now admitted to misconduct at a public hearing. We spoke with the CBC's Jason Proctor about what happened.
Yeah, so this is Sergeant Kieran McConnell. He's a 33-year veteran of the VPD, longest-serving sergeant on the force. 2 female officers and 3 students, he taught at many universities in BC as well, accused him, among 7 women actually, but 5 were substantiated, of sending sexualized messages, inappropriate texts or posts on social media about their appearances, sexualized messages to them. He's admitted that conduct, apologized or offered to apologize to them, and is now facing demotion down to a first-class constable and a 20-day suspension as part of a proposed resolution that he has reached with the people that brought the complaints against him.
And so what happens next?
Well, it's interesting. Part of the background of this is also the issue of sexual harassment within the VPD. And so part of this resolution is actually calling on the VPD to make education around sexual harassment kind of a standalone part of their training. We'll find out what the judge, the retired judge who's overseeing this, has to see at the beginning of May when she makes up her decision as to whether to actually accept this deal that, again, would see demotion and a suspension.
All right. Jason Proctor, thanks very much. Health officials say the Mpox virus is on the rise again in and around Vancouver. It spiked in 2022 and never went away. As Rafferty Baker reports, it continues to be spread in the gay and bisexual communities.
Mpox is spread through skin-to-skin contact, largely in the context of sexual activity, and in the Vancouver Coastal Health region, it is primarily spread between men who have sex with men. It arrived in the province in 2022 when there were 190 cases. In 2023, there were just 20 cases, and then last year, it increased again to 96.
Our main intention of sharing this information is to be able to increase awareness that Mpox is still circulating amongst our community.
Vidge says there haven't been any hospitalizations for the virus in BC in the last year, but there were in 2022, mainly for pain management.
It can start off with like flu-like symptoms, like a fever or sore throat, and then progresses to the skin rash where you can have multiple lesions that can appear anywhere from the genitals, the hands, the body.
Officials point out the majority of men who have contracted Mpox in the last year hadn't had the vaccine or had only one of the 2 doses.
If you are a person who has had sex with more than one partner, if you are a person who participates in public or community sex, or if you are a sex worker or someone who works in the sex industry, we're really encouraging you to get vaccinated.
Purdy says people can find more information about vaccine eligibility and where to get it on his group's website, checkhimout.ca, or through Vancouver Coastal Health. Rafferty Baker, CBC News, Vancouver.
It has been debated for decades, but now a citizens' assembly has recommended the Victoria and Saanich ought to amalgamate. And as Justin McElroy explains, a referendum next year looks likely.
Amalgamation in Greater Victoria. The debate on whether municipalities in the capital region should merge is so old that it first appeared next to ads for tobacco and World War II victory bonds. But now, for the first time in generations, it will likely be put to a referendum.
It will be definitive, at least in the short term, when we get a response from voters on whether or not this is something that they want to see us do.
That is Saanich Mayor Dean Murdoch. 7 years ago, Saanich and Victoria committed to a citizens' assembly that would explore whether the 2 biggest municipalities in the capital region should merge. This weekend, they came back with a firm recommendation to move forward with a vote, probably during the next local election in 18 months' time, something the Mayor of Victoria is fairly pleased with.
You have, competing practical issues around land use transportation where different routes end up not gelling in a particularly compatible way. There's lots of ways to look at things where we can just be a heck of a lot more efficient.
Alto says she wants to see the full report from the Assembly and have the details of a referendum question figured out before she endorses a merger, while Murdoch is more on the fence.
I will be very interested in looking at the report to see what led the Assembly to this conclusion. Is this going to make people in Saanich better off?
But both seem happy that voters will be able to have their say, and there's a simple reason why. Here is a chart. It shows the average number of municipalities per regional district in BC, along with the 4 densest areas of the province. The capital region and Metro Vancouver are very different, not just in British Columbia, but in the rest of Canada for how they're governed. Now, there will be lots of debate about the pros and cons of amalgamation in the next 18 months, but if Victoria and Saanich say yes, it could lead to a domino effect for a lot of the 250, to say nothing of the 604. Justin McElroy, CBC News, Vancouver.
Vancouver Mayor Ken Sim and several Jewish community groups are condemning comments made on social media dating back several years by newly elected City Councillor Sean Orr.
Such language is unacceptable from anyone, let alone someone who's been entrusted with public service and community leadership.
The controversy centers around a series of posts from Orr that date back to 2021. Specifically, the Jewish Federation of Greater Vancouver has called on him to retract a statement posted in 2021 on X, August 2021, stating, quote, "Everyone knows Vancouver city planners are controlled by a secret cabal of Jews who have a bunker in the Earth's core." The tweet has since been deleted. Orr says he was sarcastically quoting comedian David Cross while condemning an anti-Semitic dog whistle. He says he's committed to fighting anti-Semitism, Islamophobia, and other forms of racism. Well, the long ferry strike on Kootenay Lake appears to be over. The union says it and Western Pacific Marine, the employer, have agreed to come to terms on most issues and will ask mediator Vince Reddy to issue binding recommendations on the outstanding matters. As a result, ferry service will resume on Friday. The strike impacted 4 routes across the lake, in some cases hitting isolated communities hard as they rely on the service to get in and out. A new orca calf has been spotted in BC's southern coast. Have a look. The latest addition to the southern resident killer whale population was seen swimming near Victoria's Harbour on Sunday. The Centre for Whale Research says it is 1 to 3 weeks old and the first offspring of its mother, J40. Researchers say the new birth offers hope for that endangered group.
New calves are always a kind of weird time because it's very exciting. In such a small population, every new birth is a huge deal, and they really do count. At the same time, the first year of life is really hard for young killer whales, especially young southern resident killer whales.
Darius Madavi is here for our first look at the weather. Sun outside today, quite nice.
Yes, and instead of a look at the weather, we're going to have a hear about the weather because I have a little trouble with the graphics, but that's all right. Yeah, we saw some scattered showers across small parts of the east coast of the island today. As we head into tomorrow, we're going to see some more widespread rain. That's really starting overnight for the North Island, and then early morning, 7, 8 a.m., really starting for the west coast of the island. You can see here that satellite imagery from today, and here is tomorrow. So again, you can see that bigger wave of rain coming in, some breezy, gusty conditions coming along with that as well, hitting Vancouver probably mid to late morning, and then breezing over pretty quickly, but expect possibly some heavy rain at times.
Okay, we'll check in later. Thanks, Darius.
Thank you.
There's a look at the day that was here in Metro Vancouver. Residents may be heartened to hear that their utility bill is set to decrease, albeit slightly, but there are concerns that kicking the can down the road may cost you later. That story's next.
Hi, I'm Amy Bell, and this is your CBC Inbox. Check out CBC News BC, your local streaming channel. It's a free ad-supported TV channel that's available 24/7, delivering breaking news, including weather updates, daily headlines, and sharing stories that matter to British Columbians. Stream your favorite CBC programs like The Early Edition, BC Today, and On the Coast. CBC News BC is available on Roku, LG, and Samsung devices.
Throughout this federal election, we've been asking voters across our great big province what their main issues are. With less than 3 weeks left to Election Day, we visited Terrace in northern BC to find out what's top of mind there.
What do you think some of the big issues affecting this area are?
I think mostly just prices for groceries, I think, would be the biggest thing. And then I'm not entirely sure what the other issues are, to be honest. Like, we bought groceries the other day for our house and it was like over $500, and it's like for 2 weeks, every 2 weeks, right? Like, it's getting insane.
Definitely housing, number one, for sure. There is not very much housing in this town. As a single mom with 2 young kids, we pay a ridiculous amount of rent, which is crazy for not really that nice of a place. Other than that, I don't know, like, there's a lot, like the drugs in this town too have gotten really out of hand. Like, it's very unsafe.
I'm unemployed right now, but I am desperately trying to find a job. And I think that's another thing that's wrong with our little town here is that there's not enough jobs to be able to pay for our rent here. And it's just increasing, which is crazy to me, because there's a lot of potential in this town.
I think we've seen in this area that the Haisla in the Kitimat area have benefited, but what about all of the other reserves along that pipeline? So I think, again, you're dangling a huge amount of money to these reserves in the north that are restricted from basic services that you would enjoy in Vancouver or I would enjoy in Toronto when I'm back there. It's pretty hard to dangle that much prosperity in front of people who just haven't been able to take advantage of that for years. So I understand why they're doing that, but at the end of the day, the taxation on those companies that are running that is their driving motivation, not protecting our lands, not looking at climate change, not respecting our hereditary chiefs' rights to determine what should happen on their lands.
Meanwhile, if you live here in the Lower Mainland, a widely publicized hike in your utility bill is decreasing slightly. Metro Vancouver has unanimously approved asking staff to create a new financial plan for the years 2026 through 2030. That comes with challenges, though, as they plan to cut $1 billion in future spending. To help explain all this and how much you'll be asked to pay and the controversy surrounding that regional body, we're joined by our municipal affairs reporter, Justin McElroy. Justin, Metro Vancouver spending, fair to say, under a bit of scrutiny right now?
Oh, just a little bit, Dan, over all sorts of things. And why it matters for residents is, of course, that your utility bills, when it comes to waste and wastewater, are based on their budget. And so they asked staff, the mayors and councillors that make up Metro Vancouver, to go through a study of how they can cut those costs over the next 5 years. They came up with, like you said, $1 billion worth in infrastructure reductions, $300 million or so in operating costs. And that means over the next 5 years, if you take a look at this table, the average bill for a Metro Vancouver household will go from 5% increases over the next 5 years to 2.5% this year, 3% the year after that, then to 5%. Saves about $45 in the end when we get to 2029. So on one hand, you might think over $1 billion, that's a lot. But when it comes to overall what people will pay, it's a decrease, not a giant one. And as councillor for Vancouver and Metro Vancouver Board Director Mike Klassen pointed out, a lot of these extra costs, which are the reason for these increases, come from wastewater facility treatment plants that they have to upgrade due to federal regulations. And that's putting them in a giant bind because of how big those budgets are.
Because I think these costs are truly being foisted on our region, and we're being kind of left scrambling, trying to figure out how to pay for them. I just don't see a path. Much of the work that seems that's happening here, as good as it is pushing things further into the future. Eventually, those bills are going to have to get paid.
Justin, is this the end of the reforms people have been pushing for at Metro?
No, we're expecting later this month to hear back about the governance and remuneration review done by Deloitte, an outside firm. So we're going to be hearing more in terms of some of those bigger issues people have been asking for. Then it'll be up to the Metro Vancouver board for their next step. So this is the budget. Larger questions still to come later this month.
All right, Justin McElroy, thanks very much. There's a look east from Deep Cove, where the clouds cleared a bit. Darius is coming up with your BC-wide weather forecast. Stick around. Donald Trump jolted markets and governments again today after a sudden and dramatic reversal, pausing most of the tariffs he just enacted. It rallied stock markets around the world, but even with those massive gains, markets are still down since he announced those levies in the first place. Katie Simpson walks us through a stunning day.
Even by Donald Trump's standards, it has been a chaotic 24 hours. As he welcomed race car drivers to the White House, he confirmed his tariff walkback.
Well, I thought that people were jumping a little bit out of line. They were getting yippy, you know? They were getting a little bit yippy, a little bit afraid.
An unexpected announcement he first made in a long and confusing post on social media. All country-specific tariffs are paused for 90 days. Those countries will now be hit with a lower 10% baseline tariff. China is the exception, now hit with a higher 125% total tariff because it continues to retaliate. All of it so surprising it caught lawmakers off guard. They'd been grilling Trump's top trade negotiator for hours. He didn't mention it.
I've just been in the hearing with you, sir. But yet he announced it on a tweet. WTF? Who's in charge?
The President of the United States is in charge.
And what do you know about those details?
Well, as I mentioned...
it looks like your boss just pulled the rug out from under you.
But Trump's team says there's no confusion.
Many of you in the media clearly missed the art of the deal. You clearly failed to see what President Trump is doing here.
This was driven by the president's strategy. He and I had a long talk on Sunday, and this was his strategy all along.
Comments undercut after the Treasury Secretary wrongly said Canada would be hit by a new tariff.
Mexico and Canada, are they part of the 10%?
Yes.
But Canada does not have to deal with anything new. Canada is already facing 25% border security tariffs, 10% on energy and potash, though CUSMA-compliant goods are exempt. There are also 25% tariffs on the auto sector, steel, and aluminum. Canada has retaliated in waves, including new tariffs on finished U.S. autos, and some provinces have pulled American products from store shelves.
At least it's a beautiful day, right?
Trump's team doesn't like it.
If Canada decides to keep their retaliatory move, which I would suggest, having watched how it went with China, would be a really, really bad choice. Canada, they're in an election, so you never know. Maybe it's all election, bluster, but we don't know.
Katie Simpson in Washington. Let's get back to the markets now and that stunning rally, one that outdid days of harm. Still, it wasn't good enough to recover from weeks of tariff-driven uncertainty. And as Anise Dari explains, there are other signs the economy is still at risk.
The New York Stock Exchange closing with big gains, the first good news in a few days for investors. North American markets spiked dramatically after Donald Trump announced a pause for some tariffs. Economists say businesses can use the extra time to prepare.
So that has led to both the stock market spiking up significantly. Obviously, it's not enough to erase all the losses.
True enough, markets in both the United States and Canada jumped right as the White House made its announcement, but are still lower than before the so-called Liberation Day a week ago. And there are still signs of economic trouble ahead. Researchers point out investors are bailing on what used to be considered a safe haven, the bond market.
I think got both markets worried is that we might be seeing a foundational shift in kind of the global trading, the world order for global trade. And at that point, investors in all markets might be seeking safety, but there might not be a whole lot of places to go.
We are not fine now.
Experts say even paused tariffs cause fear.
There is a lot more drag on the U.S. economy, a lot more drag on the global economy, because essentially this is one of the biggest tax increases in American history.
And it's still unclear what America will do next.
The reality here is that firstly, you're looking at an erratic policy stance from the U.S. government. Secondly, you're looking at prolonged uncertainty, which tends to weigh on business investment, on investor decisions, and even on consumer spending.
So even though stock markets have charged upwards, many economists are still predicting recession. Anise Dari, CBC News, Calgary.
The Canada Border Services Agency, meanwhile, says it's seen a steady increase in asylum seekers at a major border crossing south of Montreal. It appears to be linked to the increasingly hardline approach of the Trump administration against migrants in the United States. More now from Vanessa Lee.
Here in Miami's Little Haiti neighborhood, people are leaning on their faith. Even in this sanctuary, there is little peace. They're caught between growing violence in their homeland and the threat of deportation.
People are even scared of coming out, going out to work. People who have been working, people who have been in schools, and even at church, we see a reduction of a number of participants.
About 500,000 Haitians live in Florida, making it by far their largest home away from home. Including this man, who will soon be a father. He tells our colleagues at Radio-Canada he feels like there is a wall in front of him. He doesn't want to be identified for fear of deportation. He says he has nowhere to go if that happens. Friends are telling me come to Canada. For sure, a lot of people will do that, he says. Already, Quebec's busiest border crossing is seeing a rise in asylum claims. In March, there were 1,356 applications, an 80% jump from the previous month. February 20th is when the U.S. announced they were revoking the legal status of 500,000 Haitians. In Canada, those making an asylum claim must fit a specific criteria. Among them, you have to be an unaccompanied minor or have close family already in Canada.
So most people coming at the border right now, they're not going to be qualified, and they will be sent to the States.
Even so, Quebec has made its position clear. The immigration minister says the province cannot take in any more asylum seekers. We can't receive all the misery of the world, he says. But the reality south of the border is growing desperation. Just this week, RCMP arrested 9 people after they crossed illegally into Quebec. Advocates for asylum seekers worry that will become a trend as the immigration crackdown in the U.S. intensifies. Vanessa Lee, CBC News, Montreal.
On the federal campaign trail today, Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre began the day in Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, unveiling his plan to get tough on crime by cracking down on repeat offenders.
Only a new Conservative government will give repeat violent criminals jail, not bail, and keep the worst offenders off our streets behind bars. Only a new Conservative government will stop the crime for a change.
Poilievre is calling it a 3 strikes you're out law. He says it will stop those convicted of 3 offenses from getting bail, probation, or house arrest. Criminals would be sentenced to a minimum of 10 years with no eligibility for parole. The Conservative leader wrapped up the day with a rally in Brampton.
Its approach that is defined by 3 objectives. Energy security first. This means using Canadian energy to displace imported energy, including energy imported from the United States.
Liberal leader Mark Carney, meanwhile, started in the Conservative stronghold of Calgary, announcing his plan to make Canada the world's leading energy superpower. Carney says a Liberal government will focus on reducing Canada's reliance on the U.S. and work to develop both clean energy and conventional energy with lowest emissions. Carney also pledged to get shovels into the ground faster by speeding up project reviews. After Calgary, he was headed to Saskatoon for a rally.
These are the medications that are most often prescribed. This is going to give a lot of relief to people that are worried about being able to afford their medication.
And NDP leader Jagmeet Singh is pledging to have all essential medication covered under pharmacare. Singh says he will start with 100 of the most prescribed meds at a cost of $3.5 billion. He says New Democrats want to set up a complete public pharmacare system within 4 years. During his campaign stop in Vancouver, he spoke at the First Nations Summit and is wrapping up his day holding a campaign event in Saskatoon. Donald Trump's trade war has put a damper on Canadians traveling south of the border, but new data is showing it's not having the same effect on Americans heading north. And as the CBC's Dale Manukduk explains, experts say it's a great opportunity for Canada's hospitality and tourism sectors.
Destination Ontario recently did a survey in the U.S. market to understand American travel intentions.
58% of Americans are still considering coming to Ontario to travel this year.
And there are a few reasons for that. Number one, it's a very safe country. Number two, we have a lot of shared values. Ontario is known for being very diverse. Number three, just making travel plans is easier.
American tourists make up about 20% of all tourism spending in Ontario. There was a drop-off in visitors after the COVID-19 pandemic, but it's slowly been creeping back to the norm. This despite booing the American national anthem and various municipalities taking down the U.S. flag. The Destination Ontario survey did find that Americans are concerned about how welcome they are.
So normally we have very high favorability ratings there, but it's dropped about 15%.
Canada Border Services data shows virtually no change in the number of Americans crossing the border in March of 2025 compared to the same time last year.
The Americans will continue to be here because it's not about the Canadians or Americans. This is about one guy. The two countries are very friendly together.
Perhaps the biggest reason Americans are still traveling here is the exchange rate.
It's basically a third off, so it's a great deal to come to Canada right now. So if you're paying $200 on a hotel room, that's really saving $60 a night. So that's a pretty substantial savings for coming across the border.
The tourism industry of Ontario is hoping governments pour more ad dollars into showcasing the province as a destination.
The industry is elbows up as it relates to policy, but we remain arms open through hospitality.
Dale Manukduk, CBC News, Toronto.
Viruses are everywhere. Almost all of them are harmless to humans, but as we've seen, dangerous diseases can break out quickly. So to help monitor potential outbreaks, scientists have turned to a new tool, artificial intelligence. Our science specialist, Darius Mahdavi, is here to explain. Darius, why did researchers create this AI?
Right. So, Dan, let's say you wanted to track viruses of concern. Testing every animal out there is impractical. So this AI model is designed to help narrow down the possibilities. Here, the researchers focused on orthopox viruses. Think smallpox, Mpox, boreal pox, but not chickenpox. So first, let's look at how previous models were built. These were trained on ecological data about the potential host animals, like a species of monkey, for example. So you tell the program all sorts of things, like where the monkeys live, their habitat, their food sources and diet, and importantly, if they are already known to be infected by any orthopox viruses. Then you do that for many species, pumping all this data into the model, and once it's all trained up, the model can predict which viruses each species might carry. And it'll even tell you how likely it is, which means scientists out in the field can set priorities. The accuracy can be pretty impressive, but a team of researchers thought we could do this even better. So they trained a new model, and in addition to all of the data about the animals, they also fed it information about the viruses. How does this virus avoid getting killed by the host's immune system? How does it get inside cells? And a whole bunch of other information stored in the virus's DNA. And again, we repeat that for all the different orthopox viruses, and what we get is an even more refined model. Maybe it's able to rule out that a certain virus could infect this species of monkey because it wouldn't be able to break into the monkey cells. Maybe it gives the same results as other models, but with higher confidence. Maybe it turns out this monkey is actually super susceptible to this other virus, which the other models didn't catch. And then those predictions can tell us where to look.
All right, and so what did they find?
A bunch of really fascinating stuff. And here's a big one. Take a look at this map. Now, the redder an area, the more potential carriers of these orthopox viruses. This map comes from direct observation. These are the animals we know are hosts. But this map from the AI, this map is from the AI, and it shows the number of animals that the AI predicts could carry the virus. You'll notice it's a lot more. It tells us both the animals and areas that we should be focusing on. Stephanie Seifert, who helped lead the project, explained why having this information is such a big deal.
It's not just when these viruses are a risk to human health, but these viruses can also have real economic impacts when they get into our food supply and affect our food security as well. So understanding and making these predictions about which viruses can affect which hosts is really important.
Still, even with the best models, we can't predict every outbreak. Pilar Fernandez, another project lead, explained why.
It's like predicting where exactly a forest fire is going to happen. You have all the elements and say, oh, the risk of fire is really high, but you don't know where the spark is actually going to happen. And so this is kind of the same idea.
All right, Darius, where do we go from here now?
Well, the next step is to expand out to other viruses, even other types of pathogens. Of course, like training any AI, that'll going to take a lot of data, but many experts consider this kind of big data research the next frontier of biology, allowing us to understand much more complex systems.
All right.
I think we're going to see a very similar thing in computational biology, where you're just going to see kind of major landmark studies probably over the next 5-10 years that are really almost entirely being driven by AI. And then you get this tiny little bit of validation experiment at the end that says, okay, like, you know, we skipped 20 years of research, we made a prediction, and in 6 months, we did what would have taken like a regular research program another couple of decades.
So there's, like you said, there's a lot more progress to make in this field. And is this AI model going to prevent the next pandemic? No, not alone. But these kinds of tools are exactly what we need to try and make better public health decisions in the future. And they're only going to keep getting better.
It's fascinating stuff. Darius Mahdavi, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Still to come, experts warn of a return of acid rain after the Trump administration rolls back major environmental protections. Stay with us.
We're sharing really important information with the public, and I feel like this is exactly what our job is, especially as the public broadcaster, especially in morning radio. That's incredibly important.
Some American scientists warn the Environmental Protection Agency's proposed deregulations could lead to the return of acid rain and contaminated soil. The CBC's Johanna Wagstaff explains.
Clean air, safe water, acid-free rain. U.S. scientists warn all of those could be in jeopardy. They're worried toxic acid rain could make a comeback in the U.S. and Canada because of this.
Today, I'm pleased to make the largest deregulatory announcement in U.S. history.
It's been a month since the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency announced changes to clean air and water regulations put in place by previous administrations.
Worst case is they would be revoked, and we'd be back to virtually square one. Worst case, we could see acid rain come back to some degree.
So for most of us, acid rain is the stuff of post-apocalyptic fiction. But back in the 70s, coal plants in the Midwest were going full steam and also pumping out pollution that drifted east, bringing real environmental damage to the US and Canada. The sulfur dioxide and nitrogen oxides from the coal plants mixed with water and oxygen, creating sulfuric and nitric acids, eventually falling as acid rain.
I am a soil chemist, and I've looked at acid rain back in the 70s, which I remember quite well, and even back into the 1960s. Of course, we had acid rain, we had urban smog, was much worse than it is today.
No, acid rain won't melt your face off. But it does have devastating consequences for the environment. Acid pulls aluminum out of the soil, and that aluminum can be toxic to plants and animals. It also washes away important minerals and nutrients that trees need to stay alive. So in the 1980s, the average rainfall in the US was 10 times more acidic than normal.
So in our more sensitive, geologically more sensitive areas, aluminum becomes more soluble in the soil, which can be toxic to certain plant species, particularly maple, sugar maple.
You heard that right. Acid rain is particularly bad for maple trees. So perhaps it's no surprise that Canada joined in on the effort to combat it. Back in 1990, both the US and Canada signed an update to the Clean Air Act targeting acid rain by reducing power plant emissions. It's heralded as an environmental success story. Acidity is now almost back to pre-1970 levels. So why roll back those protections now? Well, the current US administration says industrial regulations are costing Americans millions of dollars.
EPA will be reconsidering many suffocating rules that restrict nearly every sector of our economy and cost Americans trillions of dollars.
But there's a very real concern that rolling back those restrictions comes with a big risk to public health. So could acid rain make a comeback? The full impact of the rollbacks will likely take years to unfold. And it's not clear that coal-burning power plants will make a comeback, even if they can. Coal once powered more than half of America's electricity, but with natural gas and renewables taking over, its share has dropped to just 16%. So even with the rules relaxed, coal's comeback isn't guaranteed.
If that is the case, I'm not sure then why these regulations that are being listed here needing revision relating to disposal of coal waste and everything, why the emphasis on those if Mr. Zeldin doesn't think that coal is going to be a major player?
Science and climate specialist Darius Madavi here with our BC-wide weather forecast, at least here on the South Coast. Another pleasant-ish day.
I would say so, yeah. And we've got graphics. So let me show you what's going on here. We've got high pressure building back in, but first, that low pressure system sweeps up the coast. That's why we're going to see some rain spreading up the coast through the day tomorrow. And we'll take a look exactly when there. But after that, high pressure builds in for pretty much the entire province. So expect, no matter where you are, a fairly sunny and dry weekend. Few very minor exceptions, but for the most part. Here, let's take a look at our precipitation forecast. Again, we see that come to the North Island first, then work its way to the west coast of the island by around 7 or 8 a.m. Then, by the time we get into mid to late morning, it reaches the South Island and Metro Vancouver. Could see some heavy rain at times, but it'll be pretty brief and then move past pretty quickly. And then once we get into late Thursday, we start to see some clearing up. drier, maybe even a break for the sunset. I will note, though, that as we get into Friday and Saturday, I know that for the most part we're going to be dry and a bit sunny, but there is also a very scattered chance of showers and flurries because we are going to be a bit unsettled in the wake of that low pressure system. So showers and high elevation flurries are still possible through the day Friday and into probably Saturday morning. Most of the time you won't see it, but if you feel, a bit of a drizzle for a very short period, don't be too surprised in Metro Vancouver or across much of the island. Now let's take a look at across the province. Again, we see that sweep across very briefly. Some chance of showers, risk of a thunderstorm still present in the central interior tomorrow afternoon and evening. Be aware of that. But as we watch that sweep, after that system sweeps through, again, pretty dry across most of the province. It's just those unsettled conditions in the wake that may spread some more showers to a few folks. Here is our next few days in terms of temperatures, and I don't think we're going to reach quite far enough. You'll see temperatures come up a little bit in the interior as we get into tomorrow, just because they were a bit suppressed today. Once we get into the weekend, I don't think this takes us quite far enough, but it looks like temperatures are jumping up Monday for most places. Early next week, expect a pretty decent jump in temperatures. We'll see that in our 5-day forecast. Here are conditions across the province for tomorrow. Lots of rain coming, especially to the west coast of the island, especially more northern sections of the west coast of the island, maybe 30 millimeters for Tofino and closer to 60, 70 for a bit further north on the west coast. And here is our 5-day forecast. Like I said, Dan, get through the rain and gusty, windy conditions tomorrow, no chance of showers, and then temperatures jump up early next week.
Okay, looking forward to it. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Every dog has its day, and Oscar, aptly named after Sesame Street's original occupier, gets a second chance at life after being pulled from a garbage bin. You'll want to see this.
So I know when I really like a song, if within the first 3 seconds, I'm already vibing to it.
Hey, I'm Rohith Joseph. Vibin' is the new show all about discovering great new songs and fresh artists from across BC and beyond.
It's not one person dictating what good music is, it's the community sharing what good music is.
Stream Vibin' on CBC Listen.
Oscar is a miniature poodle who was found injured in a garbage can on April 3rd and is now recovering after surgery. He was named after Oscar the Grouch, the Sesame Street Muppet who called a garbage can home.
Oscar has been cared for at the Squamish and Neighborhood Animal Partnership and Protection Society.
Hi, Oscar. Hello, baby boy.
We're here today talking about little Oscar, who is a sweet little dog who was kindly found by some passers-by who identified him as being left in a garbage can, actually, with a number of serious injuries. Yesterday we took him to surgery, and in the hip part of it, what we had to do was actually remove a portion of the hip to allow scar tissue to form in its place. And so he'll have a really comfortable hip, even though he won't actually have the hip joint there anymore. Works really well in small dogs, and he'll be comfortable and be able to get around great on that. With regards to the elbow, we had to put that back together with a very small plate. He's got a tiny little titanium plate on his elbow, but the main part there is to try and reconstruct the joint so that it becomes comfortable, doesn't have significant arthritis or anything later on, and he can get back to living hopefully a full life. And at this point, there's no reason to think that won't be possible. He's a really sweet guy. He actually is very friendly with people and a pretty easy patient for us, so he's become quite a firm favorite very quickly.
Is that a chicken?
Good dog.
Little garbage dog.
And I hope he recovers and is friendlier than his namesake.
He looks like it.
I think so.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us tonight on CBC Vancouver News at 6. You can watch this newscast on CBC Gem, YouTube, and our website, cbc.ca/BC.
And we will have your next local news at 11 o'clock, right after the National. Good night.